The hush that settled over King's Landing in the dawnlight was a silence grown from exhaustion rather than peace. Thin ribbons of mist drifted above the scorched stones where Drogon's fire had once raged, veiling the ruined spires in a soft gray shroud that cloaked the jagged wounds of the city. The river air carried the acrid tang of still smoldering timbers, yet mingled beneath it lingered the sweeter scents of newly turned earth, and dew-touched rose petals from gardens miraculously spared in the conflagration. On the Red Keep's highest battlement, Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen in name, though the title weighed upon him like an ill-fitting helm, rested both gloved hands upon the parapet, and breathed that mingled perfume. He inhaled the promise of renewal as surely as he tasted the memory of pyres. 2 nights prior, the bells had tolled in surrender, yet the dragonfire had not ceased. On the eve of that devastation, Jon had looked into Daenerys' eyes and seen grief contending with righteousness, terror brawling with fury. Now, in the purpling hush before sunrise, he gazed down at the devastated city and felt each scar as though etched on his own skin. A bitter wind curled his dark curls against his brow. He found himself absently smoothing a stone scored black by flame. The roughness bit his fingertips, a reminder that the war was not a tale he could simply close. Footsteps approached, soft though armored. Sir Davos Seaworth paused an arm's length back, unwilling to intrude until spoken to. Jon did not look around. He knew that quiet step, the ragged wheeze that followed, the lingering smell of sea salt and onions that never quite left the night. Ballistae crews are carting the last of the bodies to the river, Davos said, lower than a whisper. Some want them buried in the Sept's yard. Others, well, others fear to lie beneath the ground where dragons might fly again. Jon closed his eyes. In the hush behind his eyelids, he listened to the seagulls calling far beyond the walls, the new day's first life stirring below. "We'll grant them their rights," he answered. "No Targaryen, nor Stark, will deny the dead their rest." His voice felt foreign to his own ears, hoarse, commanding, bound by an authority he had not sought. He inhaled once more and turned. "Tell them the king commands it." Davos' weather-lined face unfolded into a half-smile, half-frown. A mariner's smile, tempered by storms. The king," he said the title gently, as though tasting it himself for the first time. "And the queen?" he asked. "She's with Drogon along the riverbank." Jon's gaze drifted east, beyond gutted rooftops and the blackened shell of the Sept of Baelor, toward the open field where the colossal beast lay coiled, his wings tattered yet still magnificent. Daenerys kept vigil there, beneath the outstretched shadow of her last living child. She wanted to ensure no survivors were overlooked. The unsullied are searching. Grey Worm's men do not tire. "You and I will, though." Davos' voice held a note of fatherly concern. "Come break your fast. Even kings bleed if they forget their bellies." "Now." "I will." Jon nodded. "After I speak with her." Davos pressed a hand to Jon's arm, rough skin to leather. "You'll need each other, lad. People will strain to tear you apart. Lords who yearn for crowns, subjects who fear dragons, allies who crave revenge for the ruins under our boots. Best see you two are mended before the realm begins prying at the seams." He left then, cloak flapping like a tattered sail. Jon turned back to the city, chasing the shapes of memory across the rooftops. Arya darting through broken alleys, Tyrion limping past shattered bricks, Sansa far to the north reading winds from raven-ridden skies. Each ghost tugged at him, a tapestry of duty thicker than the cloak that hung from his shoulders. He reached for those threads, binding them close. Sunlight peeled through the mist, gilding the stones with pale gold. Jon descended the stairwell, boots echoing in the voided corridors of the keep. Through archways stripped of tapestries and throne room doors blasted from their hinges, he emerged into the courtyard, where ranks of unsullied stood at rest. Grey Worm saw him and nodded. The commander's face remained unreadable, yet his posture softened in the king's presence. A man can lose hatred once it has devoured purpose, Jon thought, and he prayed that truth for Grey Worm's sake as much as the realm's. Outside the gates, the air carried a churn of hope and uncertainty. Broken market stalls had been cleared, and small folk knelt amid toppled wares, sorting salvageable goods, A bronze ewer, a straw-stuffed doll, a tarnished candelabrum. One child clasped a chipped wooden horse, its wheels gone, but clutched it as though it were a dragon egg. Jon paused, watching the boy's quiet hunger for something to call his own. When the child noticed him and stared, wide-eyed, Jon managed to smile. He bent, unfastened the direwolf-shaped clasp that pinned his cloak, and pressed it into the boy's palm. "Keep this," he said. The boy blinked, then grinned with missing teeth, hugging the silver brooch to his chest as though it beat with life. Jon moved on, wind tugging his cloak free to flap behind him. Each step upon the field sounded in his ears like thunder, though the ground lay hushed. He found Daenerys exactly where Davos had said, kneeling by the black flank of her dragon. Drogon's breath steamed in the morning chill, rhythmic as ocean swells. His wings wrapped around Daenerys like a rampart, one cracked membrane shimmering where dawn light caught the scorched sinew. Daenerys had discarded her armor. She wore a simple dress of charcoal gray, the color of cooled ash, ribbons of red silk at her wrists. Her silver-white hair, unbound, flowed across her shoulders, snagging on cloak pins long gone. When Jon stopped a few paces off, she did not turn. Instead, she pressed both palms to Drogon's side, as though steadying herself against a world that might tilt. "Your Grace." His voice trembled despite himself. Formally uttered, it sounded cold. He wished he could carve it from the air and release the warmth hidden behind it. He stepped closer. "I feared you had not rested." Daenerys traced a fingertip along a fissure in Drogon's scale. "I could not sleep." The words came flat, yet carried undertow. Sorrow braided into resolve. Too many dreams burned with the city. "I wake every time I close my eyes." Jon knelt beside her, knees sinking into soft soil. "The city stands," he began, "though scarred. We will mend it. We will find a path that honors the lost." She exhaled, a sound like wind across snow. "I am a dragon. I was born to lay waste to my enemies, to tear the future free from chains." Her voice cracked, and she stared at her own trembling hand. "But I never wished for the ashes to choke me, Jon. I never wished to see children carving graves with broken toys." He placed his hand atop hers. Drogon's hide radiated faint warmth, and he felt her pulse race beneath his palm. "Children will play again. The realm will breathe again. And you and I, together, will give them that chance." Slowly, she turned to meet his gaze. In the gray dawn, her violet eyes shimmered, twin reflections of light dancing on deep water. "You still believe in me, after all you witnessed?" Jon's reply needed no thought. "I believe in who you can become, as I believe in who I must become. Neither of us chose the songs sung of our names, but we can shape the verses yet unwritten." Daenerys closed her eyes, and a tear traced her cheek, glinting where light touched salt. She nodded once. Then, "Let us begin." They rose together. Drogon shifted, lifting a great horned head to regard the pair. His molten gold eyes studied Jon, huffing steam, before lowering again, as though resigned to the pact forged in that silent moment. Jon brushed a hand along the beast's neck, feeling the thrum of ancient fires. Later, in the grand hall, roof beams charred, shards of stained glass glittering on the floor like frozen confetti, they convened a small council. Tyrion, thin-faced and hollow-eyed, stood at the queen's left, dwelling in quiet penitence. Beside him hovered Missandei's absence like an open wound. Jon felt it each time he glanced at Daenerys. Opposite Ser Davos, Brienne of Tarth, Samwell Tarly, and a smattering of lords who had survived. Gendry Baratheon, Yara Greyjoy, the newly crowned Prince of Dorne, and a maester still shaken by the cataclysm. They formed a ring amid ruin, dust swirling around their boots. Jon began with simple words. "I stand before you not as conqueror, nor as the son of Rhaegar alone. I am Jon of House Stark and Targaryen both, raised at Winterfell's hearthfire, forged in the snows beyond the wall, tempered by the flames of this city. I did not seek this throne, yet blood and battle have placed me here. I will accept it only under one condition." "None." He looked to Daenerys, who angled her chin, a silent cue he need not ask. that I rule beside the queen who fought for freedom across the sea, who freed the unsullied, who bound Dothraki to her cause by earning their hearts. We share this crown or none at all. Two sovereigns, one realm." A hush followed, broken only by the drip of water from cracked arches. Tyrion's eyes brightened with cautious hope. Davos scratched his beard. Sam beamed. Gendry tugged at the Baratheon antler pin fastening his cloak. Yara shrugged, as if to say better two dragons than none, and folded her arms. Brienne bowed. Yet the Prince of Dorne frowned, golden cloak, swishing. "We remember dragons too." Arsene turned to glass beneath Balerion's shadow. His voice lacked anger, but memory itself burned. "What assurances that your fire brings light rather than ruin?" Daenerys' reply came soft but steady. "My fire shall forge new bonds, not break old ones. I will not burn for sport nor rule by terror. The dragon within me can lay low cities, yes, but it can also warm hearths, ignite forges, light the skies so ships sail home safely. I pledge that power to the realm." "Nay," Jon continued, "and I, son of Ned Stark, vow that the North's strength stands guard for every child beneath our banner, Dornish or Northman, Ironborn or Reachman. From heart to heel, the 7 kingdoms shall be one realm, free to kneel, free to question. No man or woman will lose a tongue for doubt. No man or woman's tongue for doubt." Tyrion cleared his throat. "We have, of course, the matter of title." He glanced around at the others. 2 monarchs. Will they be styled king and queen? Kings? Queens? Jon looked to Daenerys, then answered. "Titles serve parchment. The realm serves its people." He allowed a flicker of humor. "Call us what you wish, but record in your ledgers that from this day forward, governance will be shared." Davos nodded slowly. "And how will decisions be reached when you disagree?" "Through this council," said Daenerys. "Through debate, through compromise. The Iron Throne is melted." Her eyes drifted to the hall's rear, where the monstrous chair had once loomed. "Let its swords cool into plowshares in memory. We will sit on plain wood if we sit at all." Jon added, 7 thrones for 7 regions, if they wish it. Circles, not spires. The realm will prosper, if we trust one another to speak and be heard." Silence again, but this time fertile. It was Sam who finally voiced what many thought. "We have seen darkness beyond daylight's reckoning. If the long night taught us anything, it's that light must sometimes be shared to keep burning." He spread both hands. "You have my counsel, your graces." A murmur rose, a tide of assent, slow but steady. In that cracked hall, amid ruins and ragged banners, something impossibly delicate took root. A first, tenuous bloom of unity. The days that followed unfurled like tentative spring. Blackened stone was scraped clean. Mariners hauled fresh fish upriver to feed the rebuilding crews. Northmen felled timber in Godswood, still spared of flame, shipping logs south by barge. Dothraki patrolled the streets not as raiders, but as guardians, their braids swaying like banners of intent. Children gathered at crossways to watch unsullied form shield walls, not to intimidate but to teach new city levies. Laughter returned, brittle at first, then vibrant. Within a fortnight, the ruins outside the Red Keep's outer wall had been cleared to reveal a half-buried statue. A maiden, bearing a torch, now blackened. Jon ordered her hoisted upright, the torch replaced by a forge hammer, whose haft bore carvings of a dire wolf and a dragon twined. Stonecutters etched new words beneath her feet. "May this light guide the lost." Daenerys spent mornings walking among the small folk. She learned their names: Mara the baker who had lost her oven, Tommen the lamplighter missing 3 fingers, Septon Loras who held open-air prayers for the dead. She listened more than she spoke, tears welling at each story of loss. Sometimes Drogon glided across the sky overhead, casting shade upon midday laborers, his great wings beating gusts that cooled sweat-slick brows, rather than stirring fear. Children chased his shadow in delight. Jon, meanwhile, convened nightly councils of northern captains and southern lords, forging packs of grain, stone, and coin. He insisted on personally reviewing casualty rolls, penning condolences, signing pardons for surrendered gold cloaks. He walked the ramparts each evening, watching lanterns kindle across the city like constellations. Each glow told him the city lived. Tyrion served as Chancellor of Gates, Master of Diplomacy, though the dwarf joked the title merely gave him license to drink in every tavern. For the sake of rumors? Yet he moved with solemnity, carrying weight of his crimes like a ledger he would never balance. In back rooms and riverboats, he bartered alliances, weaving trust as deftly as any spider whose throne he once coveted. Grey Worm accepted the rank of protector of freedmen, his unsullied betrothed without malice, but he took no seat at council, preferring watchtowers to halls. Often Jon joined him at dusk, speaking little, standing side by side, two warriors bound by scars invisible to all but each other. News from beyond the Trident trickled in. The Vale pledged fealty after Maester Ambrose himself escorted young Lord Robert to kneel, his voice cracking as he vowed no crossbow would fly against dragons again. The Reach, eager to trade grain for iron, dispatched fair-haired envoys laden with sacks of barley and honey. Even the Iron Islands offered grudging olive branches, Yara boasting her longships would guard the narrow sea under the Dragon Wolf banner. Dorne held itself aloof, but its prince sent sand-coated casks of Dornish red, a silent gesture that conciliation might yet flower. Amid this fragile bloom, rumors spread. Whispers of plots, pockets of resentment, drunken oaths for vengeance. Jon did not shy from them. He walked taverns unannounced, shadows of armor his only entourage, and listened. He stood silent as a barrel when angry men decried dragons, then gently questioned until anger disarmed itself into conversation. Swords rang less often in the capital now, but truth, he learned, cut deeper. During one such night, he returned late to his chamber to find Daenerys studying star charts. Candlelight gilded the curves of her cheek, highlighting fresh freckles from hours in the sun. She looked up, violet eyes weary yet bright. "I measure the constellations," she said, "so astronomers can know if their instruments still align. If kings and queens may falter, let the heavens hold to their courses." Jon removed his cloak and set it upon a chair. "Even stars wander with time," he answered, touching her hand. "But they dance together. Perhaps that is why they do not grow lost." She smiled, a small thing but warmer than morning sun. "Dance with me, then." No music played, yet they moved in silence, hands clasped, steps slow. Through the tower windows, the city lights shimmered like fallen stars. And for a moment the war felt a wound distantly remembered, rather than a fresh scar. They swayed until fatigue gave way to laughter, and when they finally slept, they dreamed not of ashes but of children's voices echoing through courtyards filled with new-planted lemon trees. Weeks slipped into months. The city walls' gaps were filled with quarried marble, though Jon chose to leave a solitary fissure above the Dragon Gate. A scar unhealed, stone left rough as testament. "Better one memory than 7 new mistakes," he told the stonemason, who nodded and chiseled around the wound, framing it with vines carved in relief. Spring washed color into the crownlands. Fields sown with northern barley rippled gold against southern poppies. Reeds sprouted in canals freshly dredged. City gates rang as new bells were forged. Smaller, gentler, tuned to tones of mourning rather than surrender. Merchants returned in droves. Ibanese ivory, Carthian silk, spiced locusts from Meereen. In the marketplaces, one could taste the world. But the realm beyond King's Landing remained fractious, and it fell to Jon and Daenerys to knit those frayed edges. They toured each region, to Winterfell, where Sansa stood icy, wary, but warned when Jon deferred to her wisdom on trade routes. To the Eyrie, where thin air stole Daenerys' breath, but not her resolve as she coaxed Lord Robert to invest in roads. To Highgarden, where golden wheat bowed before dragon shadow like devotees before an altar. In Winterfell's Godswood, beneath bleached weirwood boughs, Jon knelt and pressed his brow to the cold roots. Daenerys stood aside, respectful. The old tree's blood-red leaves whispered, and he swore to the old gods and the new that he would protect not only the living realm, but the memories of those lost. Lyanna Mormont, Theon Greyjoy, Jorah Mormont, Sandor Clegane. All the countless souls whose songs had ended. Daenerys knelt beside him and placed her hand atop his. There, beneath scarlet leaves and snowflakes drifting like feathers, they pledged to guard life fiercely, yet defend mercy more fiercely still. The North, in turn, offered ships bearing timber and fur, copper and obsidian, grain enough to fill 1,000 granaries. Sansa wrote charters outlining tax relief for small folk. Arya, ever the wanderer, promised silent tongues would keep ears to every corner of the world, listening for threats. Bran, seated by a hearth that crackled in perpetual vigil, simply stared at the flames and said, "The storm may come, but you will stand in the eye together." His words, cryptic but comforting, followed them south. Daenerys returned to Dragonstone briefly, walking halls she had known in exile. Jon followed, studied tapestries of dragons long dead, lit candles for Rhaegar, Lyanna, Visenya, Nedaris, names shadow dancing across centuries. In the chamber of the painted table, they laid hands upon the wooden map and talked of harbor fortifications, of new lighthouses, of fleets bearing masons to rebuild the stormlands. All while dawn poured through narrow windows and gilded their aspirations. On Dragonstone's wind-blasted beach, they sparred with wooden swords. Daenerys laughed when Jon feinted, quick as a wraith, clipping her shoulder. She retaliated, sweeping his legs from under him. They collapsed into wet sand, breathless under sputtering rain clouds, triumphant in the simplicity of muscle and mirth. The ocean roared, gulls shrieked overhead, and when they kissed, salt and rainwater mingled on their lips, tasting of the world they fought to mend. In King's Landing, the first parliament seated since Aerys's reign gathered within the refurbished dragon pit. Stone tiers once scarred by battle, now held banners of every region. Jon addressed them from a dais flanked by Daenerys and Tyrion, his voice echoing in the vaulted dome. "We convene to draft a code, laws of the land that bind king and commons alike. No more edicts forged by whim. No more justice meted in whispered alcoves. The law must be as transparent as sunlight and as firm as Valyrian steel." Daenerys spoke next. "We will abolish the practice of hostages as surety. No more children stolen from hearth to ensure their father's oaths. We will require representation from each great house at these gatherings. And the crown will fund orphanages and infirmaries in every major city." There were grumblings, of course, wealth taxed, traditions upended, but the people's roar beyond the walls could be heard, a tide hungry for fairness. Lords too proud to bend, faced small folk too resilient to break. In that clash of wills, the realm's spine straightened. Among the new laws etched upon parchment was the Charter of Freedmen, penned by Grey Worm and ratified by each lord. It forbade slavery upon penalty of life for life. Emancipated men and women would receive coin and farmland at crown expense. Yara Greyjoy balked loudest. Ironborn thralls had always been her people's way. But Jon met her gaze unwavering until she relented. When she did, he sensed not defeat, but reluctant admiration. Tyrion drafted articles on coinage and tariffs, Davos on maritime law, Sam on education. Each sept to maintain a free library. Each maester to teach letters to any child who requested. Even Gendry proposed the guild charter, ensuring smiths paid a fair wage and apprenticeships open to orphan girls, as well as boys. From these seeds grew a fledgling forest of equity, fragile yet fertile. Amid politics, personal threads wove through daily life. Jon and Daenerys sparred oftener, not with wood but with quills, discussing grain quotas, harbor fees, or which alleyways to pave first. They disagreed, sometimes heatedly, but each conflict ended with shared bread at dusk. Serving girls whispered that arguments with such love were more tender than kisses. Drogon nested on the hillside above the city, his thunderous breathing audible on quiet nights. Jon often climbed the path alone, cloak whipped by wind, to sit beside the beast. He spoke of sorrows he could not voice in council. The faces of men Hend killed, fear of failing those who believed in him. Drogon listened, golden eyes unblinking, and the great nostrils huffed clouds into moonlit air. Jon liked to imagine the dragon understood. When winter's edge returned, pale frost crisped the cobblestones. Fires crackled in every hearth. On the night of the wolf moon, Daenerys gave Jon a small gift. A pendant forged from a final fang of Viserion, set in braided steel. "Carry his memory above your heart," she said. "Let it remind us that rage can be turned to resolve." Jon in turn gifted her a cloak stitched from northern direwolf pelts and white fox fur. She wore it at dawn on the battlements, frost in her lashes, gaze sweeping the waking city. Slowly people embraced their rulers. Bakers left honey cakes at the Red Keep gates. Fisherfolk sang ballads of the dragon wolf to amuse children. A septon composed a hymn that wove old Valyrian cadences with northern dirges, and its refrain carried through taverns at night. Yet beyond those lights, storms brewed. Pockets of discontent sharpened blades. Remnants of the Golden Company thirsting for recompense. Box merchants ruined by new guild laws. Lords who could not bear seeing freed folk given land they once claimed. Ravens carried whispers south to Myr, Volantis, Qohor, across the summer sea. Appeals for sellswords to reclaim the rightful order. Jon learned of one such plot when Arya slipped through his study window, face flushed from an autumn ride, dagger at her hip. She recounted overheard plans in a wine sink. Talk of mercenaries poised to sweep the Stormlands. Jon pressed a kiss to her hair and summoned his council. Daenerys' jaw set like forged iron. "If sellswords threaten, we must answer with truth. We will show them mercenaries spill blood only when kingdoms forget their people. Let them see a realm whose people will stand in their own defense." Bine. Together, they rode south with a column of Northmen, unsullied, and city guards. They issued no call to arms, no press gangs. Instead, they gathered small folk in each village, listened to grievances, delivered grain where barns lay empty, offered tools to mend roofs. By the time sellsword banners flew across the sea, the Stormlands bristled not with resentment, but resolve. When the mercenaries landed at Shipbreaker Bay, they found not a fractured region, but an unbroken wall of farmers, millers, hedge knights, and fisherfolk, all under the banners of the dragon and direwolf. The sellswords hesitated long enough for Jon and Daenerys to parley. Standing upon a wind-swept cliff, waves crashing far below, Daenerys addressed their commander. "I could burn your ships to cinders," she said, voice ringing like steel on stone. Drogon's shadow swathed the sand below. "Instead, I offer you coin to return to your cities. Twice what you were promised, if you swear never to raise blade against Westeros again." "Never all." The commander eyed the great dragon overhead, measured his men's shaking spears, and accepted. The sellsword banners lowered, sails turned home. Not a soul died that day, save perhaps pride. Jon watched Daenerys slip her hand through Drogon's scales afterward, eyes closed, whispering thanks for a peace won with coin rather than flame. Years turned like pages in a tome open to sunlight. The capital thrummed. Markets spanned from the Dragon Gate to the bankside fish stalls. Temples of every faith stood shoulder to shoulder. Pillared academies taught girls and boys side by side. A young maester named Ketsaya discovered principles of canal sluice gates that curbed flooding. Mummers wrote comedies about gullible lords bamboozled by clever washerwomen. Iron Pier, rebuilt, became the busiest harbor in 3 seas. Jon and Daenerys walked those docks often, cloaked and hooded, hands intertwined. They listened to sailors boasting of safe passage. They ate fried lamprey from greasy paper cones and sampled Dornish oranges shipped upriver. No one recognized them, or if they did, they let them be. In such moments, Jon felt time slow, as though the world finally breathed at a pace they could follow. Yet he never forgot the cost of every moment of quiet. He still visited the fissure in the city wall each month, tracing a calloused thumb along the jagged edge. He spoke to the dead there, "I will honor you by living." And sometimes, he heard the faint murmur of their approval in the wind. One midsummer night, under lanterns strung across the courtyard, Daenerys danced with children from every corner of the realm, Dornish girls with sand in their hair, northern boys whose cheeks pinked in southern heat. Music of pipes and drums whirled through the air. Tyrion sat atop a barrel, tapping a spoon against a flagon, keeping uneven time. Davos clapped, laughing louder than the drums. Gendry flirted shamelessly with a reach maiden, both faces flushed from ale. Sam attempted a clumsy jig, dragging his maester's robes perilously near the fire pit. Jon watched from the arches, heart swelling to bursting. He saw Daenerys spin, silver hair flashing beneath lantern glow, laughter pure as spring rain. She met his eyes. He entered the circle, seized her hand, and together they spun beneath stars. Children squealing as they dodged skirts and boots. Music soared, night grew soft, and the world turned around their joined hands. When the lanterns burned to embers and children slumbered against benches, Jon led Daenerys to the parapet overlooking the city. Moonlight silvered her features. He kissed her forehead, then her lips, tasting the remnants of sweet wine. "Peace suits you," he whispered. She traced a finger down his cheek. "Peace suits us," she corrected. "But peace is not a resting place. It is a seed. We must tend it every day. Then let's sow fields spanning an empire." Her smile glowed. Together. Below them, King's Landing sighed. Streets pulsing with life reborn. Somewhere far above, stars wheeled on ancient tracks, silent witnesses to a world daring, at last, to dream. In the pale hours before dawn, Jon woke from a dream of wolves running through snowfields under an emerald sky. He found Daenerys asleep at his side, hair spread like spilled moonlight across the pillows. He lay still, listening to her gentle breathing, and realized that in all the wars he had waged, on battlefields and in his own heart, he had never known a moment so disarmingly ordinary. It felt fragile as a soap bubble, and yet unbreakable too, because fragility acknowledged was already half protected. He rose, donned a robe, and padded onto the balcony. The city shimmered beneath the first blush of sunrise. Bells chimed, a new melody, soft and rising, echoing off copper tiles. It was the hour of bakers kneading dough, of fishermen casting nets, of ravens beating wings toward distant keeps. Jon breathed deep of bread smoke and salt and jasmine. For the first time, he allowed himself to hope the morning might come again and again, as reliable as the tide. Behind him, Daenerys stirred. "You keep secrets from me," she murmured, drifting into the doorway. He turned. "Only the secret of how beautiful dawn looks on your face." She rolled her eyes, but the smile that followed made him feel every war worth weathered. They stood shoulder to shoulder, watching light drip gold down the palace stones. "We built this," she whispered. "We will guard it. Always." Wind riffled their robes. Drogon's distant roar echoed like thunder across a clear sky. Somewhere in the alleyways, a child laughed so loudly that even the ravens startled. That laughter, Jon thought, was a promise louder than any oath of iron or fire. And so, upon a balcony overlooking a city that had been ashes and now brimmed with possibility, a king and queen greeted the day. Two souls forged in flame and ice, holding hands as if clasped around the heart of the world, vowing not with swords, but with quiet conviction that peace, once won, would never again be surrendered. The sun crested the horizon, setting their entwined silhouettes ablaze in a crown of radiant light, and the city below turned its face to the warmth, blooming in unison with the dawn. Ka. The summer sun climbed languidly over Blackwater Bay, turning the river's languid loops into ribbons of molten brass. In the slow hush of morning, King's Landing shimmered beneath that gilded light, like a city conjured from a half-remembered dream. Voices of hawkers drifted through crooked lanes, hammers rang upon anvils. The thin peal of lute strings wandered from an open casement near the street of silk. It was a music of ordinary tasks, yet beneath that hum, a subtler cadence pulsed, the guarded heartbeat of a realm discovering, day by tentative day, what peace might truly require of it. Jon Snow moved through the Red Keep's lower corridors in soft-soled riding boots, cloak left behind for the heat. 2 King's Guard. Young Sir Roland Trant and wiry Sir Hansa Payne paced a discreet half-dozen paces astern, white cloaks flaring with each stride. Joan's destination lay tucked beyond the scullery, an arched doorway that smelled of tallow and ink. The scriptorium where parchment swirled like snowdrifts, and quills beat more fiercely than swords. Inside, Samuel Tarly hunched over a table cluttered with scrolls. A light sweat glossed his temples. His maester's chain clinked when he reached for fresh sand. Upon the table sprawled a single immense sheet, twice as long as Joan's forearm, an ambitious map of the Crown Lands aqueduct project, neat blue lines marking proposed channels. John leaned beside him. "You'll go blind before winter if you keep that pace," Sam answered without lifting his quill. "Better I lose my sight than the city lose its water. The old cisterns beneath Visenia's hill are crumbling faster than masons can shore them." He dipped into ink. "If summer runs long, docks will riot for a single bucket." John folded his arms, studying the map. "Daenerys approves your design. I hope to present it tonight. She's meeting emissaries from Norvos at sundown." Sam blew sand across fresh strokes. "Convince her to see me first and I'll sleep easier." John smiled. "She'll come. She will if you ask," Sam said, tone sly but warm. "Queen of dragons or no, she still follows the wolf when he growls." John reddened a shade that pleased his friend. He changed subject by tapping the map. "Bricks enough for all that. Gendry's guild pours new molds even now. The kiln fires haven't cooled in a fortnight. We'll have conduits ready before the festival." John glanced up. "Ah, the festival." A faint dread prickled his neck. "Remind me again why I agreed to 5 days of revels." "Because 5 days gives the realm something to anticipate besides rumors of revolt," Sam said. "Bread in circuses, the ancients would say. Only here the circus is lectures by mummers about free libraries, and the bread is subsidized by the crown." "Strange days." "Strange," John echoed, thinking of reports awaiting his seal. Grain shipments delayed by windless seas, Dornish merchants protesting tariffs. Whispers of the faith militant flexing muscle once more. Strange, yes. But peace had always been a stranger wandering Westeros in borrowed boots. He clasped Sam's shoulder. "I'll bring Daenerys. Rest your eyes before they fall from your skull." Outside, the air quivered with heat. John ascended sunlit staircases until he emerged onto a small garden terrace carved against the keep's eastern flank. The breeze was meager, scented with thyme and roasting pigeon. There he found Daenerys seated on a stone bench beneath an arbor bursting with purple wisteria. A choir of scrolls lay on her lap. Quaithe sapphire in her finger circlet glinted each time she turned a leaf. Grey Worm stood a silent sentinel behind her, helmet tucked beneath one arm. She looked up as John approached, weariness evaporating into a smile. "Every raven in the realm seeks our attention." He bowed in mock offense. "And here I thought I was the only Northborn bird you kept. You molt too often." Her smile widened, but then she gestured to the bench. "Sit." "Ah, I'm reading a petition from Old Town's archmaesters. They've drafted a treatise declaring wildfire a gift of science and wish license to study the remaining caches." "Nee." John sat. "A gift that melts flesh from bone? No. I thought the same." She rolled the scroll tight, slipped it into a willow basket, and drew a fresh one. "Still, forbidding knowledge rarely ends well. Perhaps supervised research. Far from any city," John countered. "On an uninhabited isle. With maesters we trust. On that we can agree." She set the scroll aside and laced her fingers through his. "Now tell me why you searched the keep like a hound on scent." "Sam." He recounted the aqueduct scheme, the failing cisterns, the need for her approval. Daenerys closed her eyes, head resting briefly on the arbor's stone. "Another stone upon the mountain we carry. Yet a city without water collapses faster than one without gold." She opened her eyes, the amethyst flecks flickering. "Have Sam meet us in the solar after we welcome the Norvosi. We'll sign what is needed." Grey Worm cleared his throat, more a subtle shift of breath than sound. "My queen, your grace," he said, addressing John as well. "Scouts returned from the Kingswood. They found the smuggler's trail. Fresh prints, 100 men armed, bannerless." John angled his head. Heading north or south? They circle. Gray Worm's lips thinned, testing patrol lines as wolves test sheep pens. Daenerys rose, scrolls forgotten. Take 2 wings of Unsullied. Show these wolves the pen is well guarded. Gray Worm bowed. 8 once. He strode off, plate ringing. Jon followed his departure, until helmed silhouette vanished downstairs. Trouble hounds our heels. Peace is like a garden, Daenerys answered. Pull 1 weed and 10 more sprout. We must keep pruning. She reached for another scroll but stopped herself, and instead slipped her arm through Jon's. Walk with me, before duties devour everything. They descended stone steps into a shaded arcade, where mosaics told the conquest of the original Aegon. Daenerys slowed at a panel depicting Harrenhal's burning. The dragon fire glazed deep crimson. The past hovers, she murmured. Sometimes I feel every Targaryen ghost watching. Jon squeezed her hand. Let them watch. We shape the present. At the arcade's end, open doors led into the throne room. Now stripped of the razored iron throne, its dais bare, save a circle of polished river stone where councils gathered. Carpenters were raising galleries along the walls to seat common petitioners. Sunlight struck sawdust mid-air, turning it into swirling motes. A shout echoed down the hall. Ser Davos hurried toward them, cloak flapping, a ledger beneath his arm. Forgive my haste. Ravens from Storm's End. He handed the ledger to Jon. Jon opened to find terse lines in Gendry's hand. Ships harried off Rainwood, unidentified sails, painted blood red. No casualties yet, but villages frightened. Jon closed the book, heartbeat quickening. Another weed, Daenerys said, voice tightened. We'll sail south after the festival, Jon decided. Show the banners ourselves. If pirates test our waters, we answer. Davos nodded approval. I'll speak with the dockmaster. Have a carrack prepared to accompany your flagship. Daenerys tugged Jon's sleeve. Not flagship, Morningstar, she corrected gently. Ships are like dragons. They answer to names. Davos said, smiling. And some answer to onions. He left at that, limping slightly on old wounds. Jon handed Daenerys the ledger. She tucked it under her arm. 5 days of revels, then a voyage. A queen could wish for quieter courtiers. You could send me alone, Jon teased. And miss the chance to see you in sea wind with salt in your beard? Never? Her laugh chased shadows from the hall. This was how most mornings passed. A feather's width between joy and danger, scroll and sword. They navigated it arm in arm, yet each felt, in rare unguarded moments, a faint dread, like spider silk across the skin, that too much still hung unbalanced, and the smallest gust might tip all into chaos. That gust arrived on the second night of the festival. Torches lined the long market, firelight plucking copper gleams from cobbles rinsed an hour earlier by summer rain. Stalls offered spiced almonds, lemon cakes drizzled with honey, glossy plums from the reach. Illusionists juggled orbs of colored flame. A troupe of Braavosi mummers performed the tale of Nymeria atop a wooden stage, their queen's cloak billowing scarlet. Crowds churned in merry confusion. City guards in lion-crested salets coaxed tipsy revelers away from fountains. Hooded septas handed strings of prayer beads to children. Jon and Daenerys walked among them disguised in plain wool cloaks. Only Tyrion knew of the excursion, having rolled his eyes but lent them his private unmarked carriage for a quick escape should mayhem strike. For an hour, the royal pair melted deftly into anonymity, Daenerys sampling peppered hair, Jon sipping chilled cider, shoulders brushing like lovers lost in fairground delight. Then, near the carved stone griffin that marked Maegor's Avenue, a haranguing voice pierced the festivities. Behold the dragon Tyrants, the man cried. He stood atop an upturned cart, robes of smoke-colored linen whipping in breeze. A copper mask obscured his face save glittering green eyes. At his feet, a clutch of followers raised black banners showing a red-slashed crown. Our coin is squandered to feed beasts of fire, the speaker roared. Our sons conscripted to mend walls that protect palace fatlings. We traded one mad Targaryen for 2. Jon felt Daenerys stiffen. Colors drained from joyous scene. Voices around them dipped into uneasy murmur. The masked man's followers fanned through the crowd, thrusting handbills into fists, tramping wine-filled cups under heel. Jon moved to step forward, but Daenerys caught his wrist. If we reveal ourselves, we turn a heckler into a martyr. Listen first. Jon slipped back into the press, cloak hood shadowing his eyes. The speaker's voice gained volume. King in name but bastard by blood? Queen in name but kinslayer by deed? Will you kneel forever, or will you? His speech cut short. Shouts erupted. One of his own followers, a thick-set youth, slammed a dagger hilt first into the speaker's knee. The man toppled. The youth yanked off the copper mask, revealing beer-pale features twisted in fear. "Assassin!" someone yelled. But the boy's eyes were wide, disbelieving, as if his hand moved without his own command. Guards surged. Then chaos. A powder bomb hidden beneath the cart exploded. Not flame but smoke. Thick, tear-blinding. People stampeded. Jon gripped Daenerys' arm, dragging her to a marble alcove as gray plume engulfed the avenue. Arrows hissed overhead. Screams ricocheted against shop fronts. From within the smoke, shapes darted, hooded silhouettes dragging screaming merchants toward side streets. Kidnappers? Murderers? Jon's hand leapt to the short sword concealed beneath his cloak. Beside him, Daenerys lifted her palm. A faint flicker of pale flame danced along her fingertips. Valyrian conjuration Missandei had once taught as parlor trick, yet deadly at full breath. Through the haze strode Grey Worm and 30 unsullied, spears leveled. They had tracked their queen with second sense. The sight steadied the panic. Blades glimmered in torchlight, shields locked. Jon whispered, "We can't be seen as hidden in smoke while guards fight." Daenerys nodded. Cloaks fell away. Grey Worm reached them, eyes widening, but no time for protocols. Jon barked, "Encircle civilians, cut no retreat roads. Smoke will fade." Unsullied formed concentric rings, sparks from torches splitting the fog into swirling ribbons. Jon took point alongside Grey Worm, scanning for threats. Daenerys stepped to the fallen speaker, now coughing blood through cracked ribs where crowd feet had trampled him. She knelt, the man's gaze fixed upon her silver hair. "Dragon," he rasped, voice already fraying. "Who sent you?" Her tone held no rage, only weary inquiry. He tried to spit, but flecks dribbled across his chin. "No one, everyone. You think you rule, but fear rules you." He shuddered. "You burned it all." His breath shivered outwards, and life fled his eyes. Jon looked to the dagger-wielding youth, now bound by guards. The boy trembled uncontrollably, mouth moving without sound. Maesters later would swear he'd swallowed some elixir of blind fury, for he remembered nothing but blackness. By midnight, torches guttered across a market scoured raw. 15 dead, scores injured, and seeds of dread strewn wider than any wildfire flare. In the Red Keep's council chamber, rage and suspicion jostled louder than summer cicadas. Tyrion drained his third cup of mead, voice slurred just enough. "A spectacle designed for maximum ripples," he pronounced. "Strike at the heart of the festival. Hearts tremble. If we respond with iron fists, they brand us tyrants. If we respond mild, they brand us weak." Brienne paced in mail that still smelled of forge smoke. City patrols doubled. "My knights ride circuits, but we cannot bar every alley." Sir Davos pored over a tattered handbill, recovered from the mob. No guild seal, no printer's mark. Sam, bleary-eyed, sat with fingers steepled beneath his chin. The smoke screen, ground obsidian mixed with wormwood oil, like Braavosi firework dust. Rare in Westeros. Jon listened, arms crossed. Daenerys, at head of the table, spoke at last. "Who gains from turning small folk against us? The faith no longer wield swords, Dorn edges toward detent. Ironborn have wind at their sails, not vengeance on tongue." Tyrion exhaled. "Yet mischief loves a void. Financial houses of Braavos, lost fortunes, when your slave charter abolished forced labor across narrow sea trade. A consortium of Myrish spicers saw tariffs rise. And of course, Volantine triarchs never forgive insults. Plenty of coin to hire rabble-rousers. Nah. Jon looked around. Then we follow the coin. But not by torture, not by show trials. Truth must walk in daylight. It was Brienne who proposed the compromise. Public inquest, she said. Let witnesses share voice before a gathered square, under escort of city watch. Show we have nothing to hide. Daenerys nodded. We convene in the dragon pit at week's turn. Invite guildmasters, septons, freeborn and noble alike. Tyrion will moderate. Sam will present evidence. Brienne commands security. She turned to Grey Worm. Your unsullied hold perimeter, visible but restrained. Orders agreed. The council dispersed. Jon lingered until only he and Daenerys remained. She rubbed her temples. I feared it, the day the peace revealed its cracks. He approached, palms gently encircling her wrists. Cracks let light in. We'll mend them. Will we? Her voice broke, eyes brimming. When flame and shadow always follow my wake. Jon kissed her knuckles. We root out shadow with lamp, not torch. He drew her into his arms. She rested her brow on his chest, tears dampening his tunic. 5 hours ago we laughed among stalls. Hold to that. She inhaled shakily. Hold me to it. The inquest dawned 4 days later beneath skies the color of hammered pewter. The dragon pit's great dome, repaired after long neglect, sheltered near 5,000 souls. Artisans in patched jerkins, lords in slashed velvet, maesters with quills poised, sellswords resting palms upon pommels. A low susurration filled the air, part expectation, part apprehension. A dais occupied the pit center. Tyrion, airbrushed neat, stood upon a crate, so eyes could meet him. Jon and Daenerys flanked him in high-backed chairs, simple of design. Brienne's city guard ringed the interior. Unsullied manned archways above. Tyrion raised a hand. Silence rolled outward like dropped stone upon pond. We gather, he said, voice amplified by curved walls, to sift rumor from truth. Witnesses were called. Stall keepers who saw the masked man days before, purchasing copper sheets. Glass blowers who sold him vials of wormwood oil. A fisherman's daughter who delivered crates onto a deserted jetty at dawn. Each testimony wove strands into a tapestry of methodical planning. Then the youth who had struck the speaker was ushered forward, hands still shaking. He recounted a blank haze, a hooded stranger sharing wine, then darkness, then waking amid smoke blade in hand. Sam presented a vial found on the boy. Residue matched extracts of night shadow, a rare toxin inducing trance obedience. Murmurs rippled. Night shadow hailed from Lys. Tyrion turned slowly, addressing the throng. Who trades Lysing toxins in King's Landing? Who stands to profit from fear? A guildmaster of spice imports stood, fists on hips. Those who would reopen slave routes, he shouted. Others echoed. But as voices rose, Bran Stark's wheelchair rolled from a side passage. Unexpected. Jon's heart jolted. Bran inclined his head, serene as winter moon. He spoke in low timbre, carrying eerily. Shadows fall longest where lamps burn brightest. Look to those who hide beyond seas, but also those who dine beside you. He fixed Tyrion with pale stare, then turned remote eyes to the rafters. A hush chilled the pit. Even the dragons of old seemed to hold breath in their stone lairs above. Tyrion cleared his throat. Well, cryptic truths from our green's ear. Let us examine coin flows. He signaled scribes. Ledgers were hoisted on poles for all to see. Lists of recent shipments from Volantis disguised through Pentoshi fronts. Funds deposited to King's Landing warehouses under shell companies. The copper mask cost dear. The wormwood dust cost dearer. A single Volantine banker's seal recurred. Faces swiveled to a raised platform where emissaries of Volantis sat. Their spokesman, lean with 3 gold rings through his lip, stood swiftly. We know nothing of this. His voice was silk, strained through steel. "You will know our dungeons if false," Brienne barked. Applause erupted, but Jon rose, quieting them. "No dungeon yet. Questions first." He extended a scroll. "One of your harbor scribes attested under Raven oath that these funds passed through your counting houses." The spokesman's eyes flitted across seats, calculating salvage. Finally, he bowed. "We will cooperate." "Those who forged these dealings defied Triarch edict." Daenerys leaned forward, voice ringing clear. "Then we expect immediate seizure of their accounts and extradition, should evidence warrant. Prove your good faith." The spokesman's nod bowed lower. "Agreed." Relief exhaled across benches. Threat diffused not by blade but by exposure. Tyrion raised his goblet. To ink and light, sharper than steel. That night, taverns buzzed with tales of the queen who sought truth, not blood. Handbills praising the inquest flooded streets before dawn. Scribblers called it Day of Clarity. Children chalked dragon and wolf emblems beside public fountains. But across the summer sea, insulted magnates plotted anew, and closer to home. The faith militants' new high sparrow muttered prayers that burned hotter than wildfire. Autumn loomed, crisp winds swirling orange leaves into copper gutters. In the godswood of King's Landing, a new grove transplanted from riverbank saplings, Jon stood with Bran beneath an ash turning russet. Brook water whispered over stones. "Why come unannounced?" Jon asked. Bran traced bark with numb fingers. "Threads twine. I saw shadows in the flames of Dragonstow's hearth. Your futures tremble." Jon waited. "The child of storm and snow must face a choice," Bran continued, eyes distant. "When sea gives way to glass and ravens flock to an empty throne, one crown forged of light alone may stand." Jon sighed. "Could you be plainer?" Bran actually smiled. "I'm afraid prophecy rarely speaks Westerosi." Jon clasped his brother's shoulder. "Stay a while. Aid Sam in archives. Help sift these prophecies into something we can chew." "Perhaps I will." Bran turned his chair, wheels crunching dry leaves. Before he left, he spoke softly. "Remember, brother, sometimes peace demands sacrifice unexpected." Winter's first frost kissed window panes a month later, when ravens brought dire news. A plague, Soronite fever, had erupted in Mire, and Myrish refugees sought Westerosi shores. Quarantine ports were ill-prepared. Lords of the Narrow Sea begged for guidance. Daenerys convened council before dawn. Maester Killian explained the sickness. Skin lesions, delirium, death for half-afflicted. Spread by fleas and damp holds. Only quick isolation and salves of white willow slowed it. Jon paced the solar. "If we bar ships, we doom refugees. If we open ports, we risk our own people." "Nah." Daenerys pressed fist to lips. "There must be middle path." Tyrion swirled wine he dared not drink. "Dragonstone's natural coves, deep, defensible. Erect wards, treat the sick there. Supply healers. If outbreak contained, the realm spared." Davos nodded. "Harbor currents keep filth flowing outward." "Good choice." Jon met Daenerys' gaze. "We sail at once." Within 2 days, Morning Star and accompanying carracks cut through slate seas. Salt spray iced rigging, gulls wheeled. Jon stood at prow, cloak whipping, eyes fixed on volcanic silhouette of Dragonstone rising ahead. Memories flooded, nights on ramparts with dire hope. Sam's discovery of Dragonglass, Daenerys' first arrival on those black sand shores. Now they returned not for war but mercy. Crews erected quarantine tents along wind-scoured beach. Maesters boiled water in iron cauldrons, crushed willow bark. Grey Worm drilled unsullied in new duties. Sanitation, litter removal, burial at sea for the dead wrapped in pitch-soaked linens to curb contagion. Jon spent hours ferrying water skins to fever tents, alongside common sailors. Daenerys knelt beside the afflicted, her very presence a balm, though she possessed no magical cure. She memorized each name. Ilya of Lys, Harold son of Tarik, baby Nyra, whose cries faded by dawn. When Nyra's little heart faltered, Daenerys carried the child herself to the tide line, tears mingling with spindrift as the sea bore the shrouded bundle away. Each death chipped at her, and Jon feared the returning shadow in her eyes. The one he had glimpsed before King's Landing burned. So at midnight, he coaxed her to the rampart above the stone drum. Cold moonlight slashed clouds. Waves below hissed like serpents among basalt fangs. "You cannot hold every life," he said softly. "I must try," she whispered. "Else, why am I queen?" Jon took her hands. "You're queen because you give hope. But hope dies if its bearer burns to ash." He brushed hair from her brow. "Let your people carry part of this." She rested her head against his chest. They lingered under moon's chill until bells rang. New patients arriving. She straightened. Sorrow steadied into resolve. "Then we share the burden." For 3 weeks they battled plague. Losses ran high, but strict measures staved off citywide spread. By first snowfall, the outbreak waned. A final pyre burned on the beach, its smoke spiraling into pale sky like a ribbon of mourning and triumph in one. As flames guttered, sailors knelt in sand, chanting thanks to dragon-wolf rulers who risked plague beside them. That night's feast was humble. Broth, hard bread, a single cask of barley beer shared cup to cup, yet no banquet tasted sweeter. Jon and Daenerys walked shorelines after, sand crunching under boots. The wind carried scent of pine smoke. Jon said, "The realm will remember this, not the smoke in the lawn market." She squeezed his fingers. "Memory is treacherous. We keep earning it." He halted, drew something from beneath his cloak. A slim circlet of forged Valyrian steel, inset with polished dragonglass shards. No gems, only jet and metal gleaming, like star-flecked night. "For you." She stared, breath lost. "A crown." "A reminder," he said, voice low, "that your strength was born beneath the mountain of Dragonstone long before thrones or titles. Wear it when doubts crowd." He set it upon her brow. It fit as though hammered by destiny. Tears brightened her eyes, but her smile rose stronger. She reached into her own satchel, retrieved a leather-bound bundle. "And for you." Inside lay a dagger, not Valyrian but castle-forged, hilt wrapped in white direwolf hide, pommel shaped like intertwined wolf and dragon. "May it guard you while I cannot." He unsheathed the blade, testing its balance. "Perfect." He sheathed it, then pulled her into him, their breaths mingling clouds against the winter stars. Above, Drogon passed, wings sculpting the dark, his roar rolling across the bay like some ancient benediction. Spring of the following year blossomed with purple crocuses, carpeting the reach and gulls, nesting atop the Sept's reborn dome. King's Landing prepared for a harvest of light ceremony, lanterns loosed upon the night sky honoring plagues fallen and peace's promise. Lords from every region poured into the capital. Even the Dornish prince accepted invitation. Jon presided over final rehearsals of a lantern ballet choreographed by Miri of Lies, a swirl of dancers bearing paper globes. Daenerys visited orphanages coated in fresh lime wash, children painting window shutters sky blue dyed. But beneath festivities, High Reverend Amory, a fire-eyed preacher who had inherited scraps of faith militant, spun sermons in dim cellars, decrying heathen dragon witch and northern usurper. His flock swelled, paupers stung by tax levies, small folk unnerved by plague, zealots awaiting sign. The sign arrived when a comet, blood bright, gleamed in the western sky 3 nights running. Reverend Amory seized upon it, proclaiming the Red God's hour of reckoning, though he borrowed a roar myth more than 7 scripture. 2 disciples breached the houses of healing, smashing tincture vials, shouting for purging sin. They were subdued, yet whispers flew faster than ravens. Jon summoned council. "We cannot permit another cult to kindle," he stated. But each crackdown fans flame. Tyrion suggested infiltrators to seed dissent. Brienne urged arrest of leaders. Sam proposed theological debate to undercut zeal. Daenerys listened, then said, "They fear dragons. Show them dragons listen." Story. And so, on the eve of Harvest of Lights, Daenerys appeared unannounced at Reverend Amory's sermon, outside Flea Bottoms, ragged, septuika. She came cloaked in plain linen, Drogon circling high overhead but out of sight. Jon shadowed near, sword hidden. Amory's words faltered as murmurs spread. The queen among them. His gaunt face tightened. "False queen," he barked. "Come kneel before the Seven's judgment." Daenerys stepped onto a broken crate, voice calm. "I kneel to no judgment born of fear. But I stand ready to listen." She gestured. "Speak your charges." Shock rippled. Amory found his tongue. "You burn cities, unleash plague, crown a heretic." She raised a hand. "The plague I fought beside my people. The city we rebuild stone by stone. As for heresy..." She glanced skyward. Drogon swooped, torchlight glancing off obsidian scales. Then vanished again into clouds, more awe than threat. "I worship life. If the gods you name demand I scorn mercy, then yes. I am heretic, and gladly." Whispers tore through crowd. Daenerys turned to them. "The faith teaches the crone's wisdom, the mother's mercy. I honor both. Judge me by deeds, not rumors. Walk the markets, ask plague widows who brought them bread, ask freedmen who now own land. If after that you deem me false, I will accept your censure." "Manazan." She stepped down. Silence swallowed the square. Reverend Amory's face bleached paper white. Words abandoned him. Small folk parted for the queen as she passed, some bowing, others simply watching wide-eyed. Later that night, Reverend Amory tried to flee the city, but was arrested by City Watch on forgery charges. Nothing to do with faith, everything to do with stolen alms. His flock frayed without shepherd, many drifting into legitimate Septus care. When dawn broke on Harvest of Lights, 20,000 lanterns rose above Blackwater Bay. Each flame mirrored upon calm water until the whole bay seemed a second sky ablaze. Jon and Daenerys stood atop the harbor bastion, shoulders touching. Tyrion leaned against Merlon, cheeks ruddy from wine. Davos traced shapes of dolphins among lantern constellations. Sam scribbled notes on airflow patterns. Brienne simply smiled. "Tears bright as steel. The lights," Daenerys whispered. "What do they spell?" Jon watched reflections tremble. Hope, perhaps. Or warning. Fragile as paper, bright as fire. She turned to him. "And us? We are lanterns too," he said. "But we fly together." She kissed him then softly, beneath stars above, and stars reflected below. Cheers echoed from docks. Above, Drogon traced lazy arcs. Each wing beat scattering gulls, yet none fled in terror. They had learned this sky held room for them all. That night stretched into laughter, music, quiet confessions. But just before first light, a raven arrived from the wall. Its message, ink smudged by frost, bore stark tidings. Glaciers beyond Eastwatch calved with unprecedented fury, hurling icebergs south. Strange lights flickered nightly in the haunted forest. Wildlings spoke of whispering winds carrying voices of long-dead warlords. Jon read and reread, unease knotting. He found Daenerys on balcony, hair loose in dawn breeze. "The North calls," he said. She scanned the letter, lips thinning. "We knew peace would never be endless. Yet we bought time," he answered. "Enough to face what comes together." She exhaled, breath visible in morning chill despite southern latitude. "Then to the wall we journey. The realm's heart is strong. It will beat while we go." He nodded. "Bran's riddles, ravens to empty throne. Perhaps this is it." She slipped her fingers through his. "Whatever waits in that storm of ice and ghosts, we face it as one." As rosy light spilled over rooftops, bells of the Red Keep tolled. Deep, solemn, sure. City folk paused, mid-cleaning, mid-embrace, mid-dream. They looked toward the Crimson Tower and did not tremble, for they had come to trust that sound. Not a knell of doom, but a summons to stand together. And so a new chapter began, one of cold journeys and spectral threats, of tempests both real and in the hearts of men. Yet beneath it all beat the steady rhythm forged by dragon and wolf, a promise glimmering like lanterns across Blackwater Bay. That no night, however long, could silence the voices of those who had once, even briefly, tasted the dawn. Kaya, the biting wind that swept across Castle Black's ramparts, was an old familiar adversary, but Jon found it had lost none of its teeth. It slashed through his furs and cloak, as if to remind him how small men truly were. Upon the wall, between worlds, snow eddied in mad circles around the boots of the watchmen above. Hoods drawn, eyes squinting eastward at the shrouded forest, where sunrise never fully broke through. Far below, black crows and white-furred direwolves left their prints beside the great iron gates. And the garrons in the stables huffed frost into the pre-dawn air, their hides already slick with brine from the salt blown up the cliffs. The king and queen had ridden north with only a modest retinue. Sir Davos and Brienne, grim-faced and silent, Maester Samwell and Maester Killian, each wrapped in triple scarves, a handful of unsullied chosen by Grey Worm, who himself remained in King's Landing to keep the realm steady. Arya had appeared unannounced, as she was wont to do, sidestepping the escort at Moat Cailin, and slipping through snowdrifts as a shadow walks among trees. Sansa, her letters clipped and crisp, waited in Winterfell, overseeing the North's thawing trade with the Crown lands, but sent 100 loyal men to ride ahead and see the passes clear. Daenerys, in the saddle astride a white courser bred in Dorne, wore a mantle of direwolf pelts and stark gray wool. Her hair, silver and unbraided, caught the wind in ribbons that snapped and tangled. She had insisted upon the journey when the raven came, her eyes kindling with that old impossible fire. Jon knew she carried as much unease as hope, feared that the wounds of winter might yet outlast the spring they had so carefully sown. They crossed into the haunted north beneath the veiled sun, banners furled to keep their presence secret, and it was as if the world itself grew quieter in their passing. The king's road was a ribbon of packed snow, flanked by frost-wreathed pines and hoar-iced willows. Frozen streams lay like shattered glass beneath their horses' hooves. Every night the fire was built high, and every night Jon listened to the wind, wondering if it still whispered the names of the lost. At Castle Black, the garrison lined the yard to greet them. Old friends and new, Ed Tollett, leaner now, commander's cloak dusted with fresh powder. A dozen wildlings with spears and axes, their breath steaming as they eyed the queen with a mixture of awe and caution. 24 sworn brothers, their black cloaks neat, their faces itched with that peculiar watchful patience found only in those who had stood upon the wall in the darkness and lived to see another dawn. Jon dismounted and strode to Eddard, clapping him on the arm. "Still alive," he grinned. Ed's eyes flickered with rare mirth. "For my sins, Snow, but the wall stones remember you. Nitterrain." Daenerys approached, nodding solemnly to the Black brothers. Some bent knees, others bowed heads, none quite certain how to greet a Targaryen queen in this cold corner of the world. Daenerys smiled. Not the dazzling, fire-bright smile of King's Landing, but the gentle, uncertain one she had offered slaves and orphans in far warmer lands. "I come as guest," she said, her voice clear in the brittle air. "I come for counsel and truth." They welcomed her, and even the wildlings gave a cheer. Not loud, but true. The council gathered that evening in the solar above the mess hall, the table crowded with furs and maps, flagons of hot mead steaming beside wooden cups. Sam laid out the latest missives, wildling scouts reporting strange lights at the edge of the world, the dead whispering in the trees, a thinning in the wind that reminded the old of the worst winters they had ever known. Maester Killian showed Jon a shard of ice, hard as iron, cold enough to blister skin, washed ashore with driftwood at Eastwatch. It does not melt, even in the hearth's heat. Jon tested the shard with a gloved finger. It rang faintly, a bell's note from a forgotten dream. Arya, silent at his side, traced the map's lines, marking the sightings. A cluster of signals, all clustered along a northward line from the shivering sea to the Frostfangs. "There's something in the woods," he said, "something driving the animals south. I saw a flock of crows so thick they blackened the sun at dusk." Brienne frowned. "If it were the dead, we'd have seen more than birds." "Perhaps not the dead we remember," said Ed. "Old Nan used to say the long nights shadows change shape when men forget to fear them." Sam adjusted his spectacles. Bran's letter, he warned of glass upon the sea, voices on the wind, a crown of light or none. It's prophecy, yes, but every sign matches old records of magical turbulence. Something is brewing. Daenerys closed her eyes, fingers pressed to her brow. Is it another war? No. Jon's answer was quiet, but steady. Not yet. But it's a test. The world knows peace. Now it will see if peace can hold when the cold comes again. Miss. They agreed to send parties north, half wildling, half black brothers, with Arya leading the scouting. Daenerys would remain at Castle Black, learning from the elders, tending the wounded, speaking with the wary free folk who had never trusted a queen before. Jon would lead the first foray beyond the wall, armed with dragonglass and direwolf blade. No banners, only the quiet promise that he would return with answers or not at all. The march north was silent, save the crunch of boots on crusted snow. Ghost ran ahead, his white fur nearly invisible against the landscape, the only warning a flash of red eyes in the dusk. Jon's party was small. Arya at his left, two wildlings named Torm and Mag the Younger, Sir Brienne in her plainest armor, and a handful of volunteers from the Night's Watch who had seen more winters than summers. No one spoke more than needed. The forest pressed close, its old trees watchful, its snow heavy with secrets. They walked for 2 days, sleeping beneath pines, waking to find new tracks, elk, hare, once the massive print of a snow bear, farther north than any should roam. The nights brought auroras, twisting ribbons of green and purple that crackled with a sound that was almost music, almost a warning. On the third night, Arya woke Jon with a hand on his shoulder. Something's coming, she whispered. Her wolfish senses, keener than his own, had caught it first. Jon rose quietly. The world was a bowl of moonlight. In the distance, the forest's edge glimmered like cut glass. He could see the river, frozen but for a seam of dark water at its center, running north to the ghost of a bay. And in the trees, a flicker of fire. No, not fire, but something colder and stranger, like moonlight flowing through the branches. The wildlings stirred, hands tightening on spears. Brienne stood, sword half drawn, her breath a pale mist. Jon led the way, ghost at his heel. Arya vanished into the gloom, a shadow among shadows. The light did not fade but grew sharper, coalescing into a figure at the forest's edge. A man, or something man-shaped, wrapped in furs so white they almost vanished against the snow. His eyes glowed like blue embers, but there was no malice in them, only weariness. He raised a hand, palm outward, and spoke. A whisper, yet it carried through the stillness. You are Jon Snow, king of the south, son of wolf and dragon. You are not welcome, but you are needed. Jon stopped 10 paces away. Who are you? I am the last of the Watchers, said the figure. Not of your wall, but of the old world. The world before the wall was built. I am memory given form. Are you a ghost? Arya's voice came from behind Jon's left shoulder. The man smiled, thin and bitter. A memory, not a ghost, but the past walks with flesh in these woods. You have felt it, the wind that carries voices, the ice that does not melt. The world you have built to the south trembles at the edge of this one. Jon drew Longclaw, not in threat, but in respect. What do you want from us? The Watcher knelt, pressing one hand to the snow. The earth shivered, and a crack opened, showing old ice beneath. Ice laced with veins of black, pulsing faintly with inner light. The barrier between worlds grows thin, he said. Not because of war, but because peace grows strong. The magic that held the wall was woven from fear, from division. Now, as the world heals, that magic falters. Arya looked at Jon, face unreadable. Is that why the wind is strange? Why the birds fly at dusk? Yes, the Watcher replied. The world must choose. Will the living fear the dead, or will they walk beside them? Will the memories of winter remain wounds, or will they be healed, woven into the life you have fought to reclaim? Nadim? Jon sheathed Longclaw.or, and if we choose to heal, The Watcher's eyes softened. Then you must walk further north, to the place where the wall was first raised. There you will find what remains of the old power, and there you will decide whether it is to be ended or remade. He rose, the moonlight clinging to his furs. But beware. Not all shadows seek peace. Some will try to turn this healing into new war, for there are always those who thrive on fear. Guard your heart, King of the South, and trust those who have crossed the darkness before. Daenerys. With that, the Watcher faded, his shape dissolving into mist. Only the crack in the snow remained, faintly glowing, a wound and a path. The journey to the Shivering Sea took another 3 days, each colder than the last. The woods thinned, the air grew sharper, the sky a constant riot of colors, as if the gods themselves painted warnings each night. They passed old ruins, stones carved with sigils lost to memory, a circle of blackened trees, a cairn crowned with feathers. At last they reached a frozen headland jutting into the sea. The wall's original foundation, Sam had guessed from the old maps, long since buried by snow and time. Here, the ice was deeper, blue and ancient, riddled with the dark veins Jon had seen in the Watcher's vision. The sea was a mirror, its ice unbroken, save for a single black lead. The sky roared overhead, and in the silence Jon felt every eye of history upon him. The first men, the children, the kings and queens who had risen and fallen, the ghosts who haunted his own dreams. He knelt, pressing his palm to the ancient ice. Ghost sat beside him, the direwolf's breath steaming in the wind. He spoke softly, a prayer, a plea, a promise. Let the world remember peace. Let the old wounds close. Let the dead rest, and the living thrive. The ice pulsed. Brienne and Arya drew near, wary but unafraid. The wildlings stood at the edge of the clearing, watching. The wind picked up, and for a moment, Jon heard voices in its howl. Lyanna, Ned, Ygritte, even old Jorah Mormont, their words woven into the music of the world. The ice beneath his hand cracked, then healed, the dark veins fading, replaced by a soft golden glow. A warmth spread through the clearing, not fierce but gentle. Like sunlight on the first day of spring. Arya touched his shoulder. It's done. He nodded, tears freezing on his lashes. They returned to Castle Black to find Daenerys holding council in the mess hall, surrounded by wildlings and black brothers, their faces wary but hopeful. News of the peace beyond the wall had spread, and already some of the free folk spoke of venturing north again, seeking lost kin or old haunts. Jon told Daenerys everything. The Watcher, the ice, the choice. She listened in silence, her hand tight around his. "And you chose healing," she said at last, voice quiet. "I chose to trust the living," Jon answered. "To let the past rest." She kissed him softly, there before the fire and the assembled host. There was no ceremony, no crown. Just the warmth of arms and the hush of the wind. The return south was slower. The snow melted sooner that spring, and buds pushed through black earth along the King's Road. The air carried the scent of sap and green things. When they reached Winterfell, Sansa embraced Jon with a fierceness that startled him, and even Daenerys earned a genuine smile. The feast that night was one of celebration, not of victory, but of survival, of a world reclaimed and remade. Arya drank wine and told tales of ghosts in the woods. Brienne and Tormund traded stories of battles, past and blades broken. Sam and Maester Killian compared notes on ancient ice and new omens. Jon and Daenerys walked the battlements in the quiet after. The stars overhead were bright, untroubled, the auroras gone with the winter. The realm below was quiet, and in the hush, Jon felt the last weight lift from his chest. Daenerys slipped her arm through his. "You think it's truly over?" "Not over," Jon said, smiling. "Nothing ever is, but for now it's peace. The kind we fought for, the kind we feared would never see." She rested her head on his shoulder, her hair soft against his cheek. "Then let's live in it, for as long as it lasts." He held her close, and together they watched the world spin on, beneath a sky unscarred by war, where even the old ghosts could finally rest. In May Key, As spring deepened, green swelled across the north with a vengeance. New grass uncoiling from black earth, hawthorn blooming wild in tangled hedgerows, snowmelt churning in the creeks until they leapt their banks. The ancient walls of Winterfell were a living cloak of moss and wildflowers. Children laughed and ran on the ramparts as if the castle itself had been reborn, its cold stones warmed by voices and firelight. No banners of war flew from the towers, only the direwolf and dragon side by side on the great keep, crimson and silver on white, flapping softly above a realm determined to live rather than merely endure. Jon Snow awoke before dawn as he always had in the days before peace, old habits lingering, even as his bed was no longer a hard cot in a freezing cell, but a feather-stuffed mattress hung with rich furs, and the gentle weight of Daenerys' arm curled across his chest. He watched the way pale morning light gilded the curve of her shoulder, the silver strands of her hair. For a moment, he felt suspended outside time. The king and queen, not of Westeros, but of this one sun-dappled room, a sanctuary cut off from cares and counsels and omens. She stirred as he traced his thumb across her knuckles. "I could stay here forever," she murmured, not quite awake. Jon smiled. "If you did, the realm would collapse from neglect." She propped herself on an elbow, eyes teasing. "Let it. Let's see if the world can mend itself for once." They lay in silence, content. Somewhere Rook called. The castle's bell told the hour, low and mellow. Finally Jon rose, pulling on a woolen shirt and breeches, moving as quietly as a shadow. He slipped from the chamber, boots whispering along the rushes, and found Ghost asleep before the door, tail twitching in a dream. Together, man and wolf padded through the cold corridors toward the kitchens. The castle was stirring. Maids scattered fresh rushes and carried sloshing buckets. In the kitchens, steam clouded the rafters, and the cook, a barrel-chested woman with a voice like gravel, grumbled good-natured curses at her scullions. She pressed a mug of mulled cider into Jon's hands without comment, only nodding at the wolf with mock annoyance as Ghost licked up a dropped heel of bread. Jon stepped into the godswood, steam from his breath mingling with the fog. The heart tree stood serene at the pool's edge, white bark scarred and bleeding crimson. He knelt, set the mug aside, and closed his eyes. He did not pray with words. He never had, but with a silent thankfulness, a sense of awe at simply being alive, being here, now. When he opened his eyes, Arya stood at the opposite edge of the pool. She was no longer a girl, but there was a feral energy to her movements, as if she might slip away at any instant, vanish into mist. She gave him a half-smile. "You're not rid of me yet," she said. "Not while there's no war to chase." Jon laughed. "You could stay as long as you like. No one would dare stop you." She flicked a stone across the pool. It skipped 4 times before sinking. "I'm leaving soon, south, maybe farther. The world's too quiet here. I want to know what's beyond." He tried not to let sorrow touch his face. "You'll write?" She shrugged. "If I find anything worth telling." But she crossed the clearing and hugged him tight, her voice a whisper in his ear. "You're a good king, Jon, even if you never wanted the crown." She slipped away before he could answer, footsteps already lost among the trees. Jon sat for a long while, watching the light shift through the branches, the breeze stirring ripples on the black water. When at last he returned to the keep, Winterfell was humming. Daenerys was already at council, Sansa beside her. Parchment spread across the great table, as lords and ladies, north and south, new and old, gathered to discuss harvests and taxes, the slow rebuilding of ruined towns, the fate of the last straggling bands of wild. Sansa looked up as Jon entered, a wry smile on her lips. "You're late." Jon inclined his head. "I have a forgiving counsel." Gendry Baratheon stood beside Davos Seaworth at the hearth, muttering about tariffs. Across the table, Samwell Tarly rolled up a sheaf of notes, eyes bright behind his spectacles. Even Lady Lyanna Mormont, fierce as ever despite the healing scar on her cheek, sat upright in her chair, hands folded over a sword almost as long as she was tall. Daenerys gestured him to her side. "The Prince of Dorne wants to send envoys north to see how you're faring without sun or oranges," Sansa added, "and the Ironborn want compensation for a fleet lost in a storm." Yara sent a raven. Her words were mostly curses, but she did sign it with respect. Jon groaned. Let Davos answer. He knows more about storms than I do. Davos grinned, mouth twisted with salt-worn wisdom. I'll tell Yara what she can do with her ship masts. As the morning wore on, they moved from petty disputes. Who owned which mill, whose sheep had strayed into whose pasture, to larger matters. Roads were being rebuilt with crown funds, soldiers retrained as builders and engineers. A new university was rising at White Harbor, Sam's pet project, where girls and boys studied healing and law alike. When council adjourned, Daenerys drew Jon aside. Sansa thinks the North will remain restless so long as it is governed from afar. She wants greater autonomy. She's right. Jon nodded. She always is. And you. He leaned against a window watching swallows wheel over the Bailey. The North is stubborn. Let it breathe. If it stands apart, let it be through trust, not rebellion. Daenerys studied him, head tilted. Will you stay here then? He shook his head. I belong nowhere and everywhere. I'll travel between. Keep the lords honest, keep the peace, and I'll always return to you. She smiled, but sadness lurked at its edge. You'd ride forever if it meant you never had to wear the crown for more than a day. He kissed her palm. Perhaps, but I'll wear it when I must. Dower. In the weeks that followed, peace proved a restless guest. Arya departed at first light one morning, a single pack slung across her shoulder, her face set against tears. Sansa hugged her in the yard. Jon embraced her at the gate. Right, he told her again. She grinned, eyes fierce. I'll return before the first snow, if the sea doesn't swallow me first. Then she was gone, a speck against the sunrise. Gendry rode south to oversee the forges of King's Landing, Davos at his side. Brienne returned to the capital with a new retinue of northern knights eager to prove themselves in service to the realm. Sam remained at Winterfell, his library growing, his wife Gilly teaching letters to the children of the keep. Summer swelled and faded. In the south, the Queen's peace held, merchants flourished, crops grew thick, and even the Dornish sent baskets of fruit as tribute. Yet rumors always gathered like clouds on a fair day. Some said the old faiths muttered of a child born beneath a bleeding star. Others whispered of sellsword captains gathering in the stepstones, spoiling for a cause. But for a season, none of it reached the heart of Westeros. Jon and Daenerys traveled often. To White Harbor, where they blessed the new university and feasted beside the Manderless. To the Trident, where they saw the field seeded for the first time since the war. To Old Town, where the Archmaesters debated wildfire and healing. In every hall, the sight of king and queen together, ruling as one, put to rest the worst rumors that either harbored fire or ice too dangerous to trust. At night, in quiet moments, Jon sometimes asked Daenerys if she missed the east. Meereen's pyramids, the sharp scent of spiced wine, the warm winds off the narrow sea. She would smile, wistful, and sometimes she would answer, I miss what I thought I could be. But here, I am what I am, and you are with me. In those moments, peace felt almost simple. Autumn arrived, crisp, golden, carrying rumors anew. Maester Killian sent ravens from King's Landing. The High Septon preached reconciliation, urging the great houses to unite for the coming winter. The faith militant, once restless, now sent volunteers north to build orphanages and plant orchards. Dorne's new prince journeyed in person to Winterfell, riding through the snows with a column of brightly clothed men and women. He brought oranges, silk, and his own children, who played with the Stark and Targaryen household, their laughter echoing in the frosty courtyards. Daenerys sat with Sansa in the solar, sunlight spilling across the charts of trade. The world feels fragile, Sansa said, rolling an apple in her palm. Sometimes I wake, waiting for news of war. Daenerys nodded. So do I. But we build peace as we built our armies, stone by stone, word by word. It is slower, but it endures. Jon joined them, bringing news from the wildlings. Tormund sends word. The free folk settled far north of the wall have found rich hunting grounds. They'll send furs, and smoked fish when the first snows fall. Sansa raised her apple. To peace, then, and to the stubbornness that keeps it. That night, after a feast in the great hall, venison pie, baked apples, laughter swirling like snow, Jon wandered the battlements alone, the air sharp and clear. Below, lanterns flickered in the windows. The howls of distant wolves drifted from the woods. He found Daenerys waiting at the highest tower, wrapped in a cloak of white wolf fur. She pointed south, where the sky glimmered with a faint aurora. Remnants of the winter past, perhaps, or something new. "Do you think the world will remember us, Jon Snow?" He considered. "Perhaps not by name. But they'll remember this peace if it lasts. They'll remember the children who grew up with dragon and wolf watching over them." She leaned into him. "Sometimes I wonder if it's enough." He wrapped his arms around her. "It's more than I ever hoped for." They stood together as the stars brightened. The realm behind them slept, untroubled. Whatever waited beyond tomorrow, tonight belonged to them. To the north, to the memory of old wounds healed, to hope made real. Seasons wheeled onward, years measured in new births and new crops, not in the battles fought and lost. Arya returned from the east, bearing tales of lost cities, strange gods, and an armful of scrolls for Sam. Sansa's children played in the Godswood with Daenerys youngest, laughter and shrieks echoing under the heart tree. Sam's university graduated its first class, maesters, healers, and judges who returned to every corner of Westeros to teach, to mend, to build. King's Landing grew into a city of learning and music, the bells ringing out to mark festivals, not funerals. The Dragon Pit became a theater and market. Drogon, grown old and content, flew only rarely, sometimes spotted gliding above the narrow sea, always returning to Daenerys when called. Jon and Daenerys aged gently, their hair silvering together. They ruled less by decree and more by example, letting new leaders emerge. Sansa in the north, Gendry in the Crown Lands, Lyanna among the wildlings. When at last they stepped back from the thrones, choosing to spend their winters at Winterfell and their summers by the sea, no one objected. Their peace had taken root. The world had learned to govern itself, to settle disputes by law and by counsel, not by fire and blood. On the last morning of their reign, Jon walked the Godswood with Daenerys, their children and grandchildren trailing after them. The heart tree's face was soft in the dawn, the pool black and clear. He knelt and whispered thanks, as he had so many years ago, and felt a calm settle over him. Daenerys pressed her cheek to his. "We did it," she whispered. He squeezed her hand. "We did it together." And as the sun rose over Winterfell, over a realm at peace, at last, with itself, the world seemed for a rare and precious moment perfectly still. The wind in the trees was gentle. The river ran sweet. And in the hearts of those who remembered, and those who had never known war, there was only peace. Winters in Westeros had always been a time of dread, when the rivers crusted over, and white winds prowled the woods, when food was rationed, and folk huddled close to fire and kin. But the years that followed Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryens, long reign turned even winter into something new. A season of preparation, not despair. Where once the great castles closed their gates and prayed for survival, now the harvest stores ran deeper and the granaries fuller. Roads were kept clear by convoys of snowplows and chains of torches, and no child in the north went hungry unless all the world starved. This was the legacy Jon and Daenerys left behind. A realm that did not merely hope for peace, but built it, shaped it, worked it with bare hands and clever minds. In the north, at Winterfell, the Great Hall was never empty. If not the laughter of children, then the talk of counsel, the song of bards, or the debate of scholars. A score of years had passed since Jon and Daenerys claimed the crown together, and though the seasons had laid silver across their hair and eased the edge from their bones, their eyes still held the bright steel of youth. If not in the mirror, then in the way they watched each other and the world. The halls of Winterfell rang with life. Daenerys was often to be found in the solar, papers spread before her, pen scratching answers to correspondences from the south. She had never truly put aside the habits of rule. Even after their abdication, the lords and ladies of the realm had turned to her wisdom in times of uncertainty, and she found a pleasure in guiding from afar. No longer as the queen who must always decide, but as the matriarch whose word was advice rather than command. Her letters stitched the realm as surely as any king's decree, though now she did so with stories and gentle rebuke, advice laced with the hard-won lessons of fire and war. Jon, meanwhile, found himself restless with the peace he'd fought to win. He walked the walls with his grandchildren, teaching them the names of the old towers and the hidden doors in the crypts. He trained the older ones in swordplay, insisting as ever that the purpose of strength was to protect, never to threaten. He hunted in the woods with Ghost, older now, his muzzle flecked with white, his gait slower, but his eyes just as bright. When winter's storms abated, Jon rode the King's Road, visiting villages and holdfasts, hearing petitions, offering quiet judgment. The folk called him the Old Wolf, and sometimes, when he laughed with a circle of small folk in some smoky hearth-house, they dared to call him Your Grace, and Jon would only shake his head and smile. Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell and Warden of the North, ruled with an even hand, and all the realm respected her for it. She never forgot the long lessons of war and betrayal, nor did she let herself grow hard as stone. Her children, sons and daughters, some grown, some not yet out of the nursery, were a rowdy, clever brood, trained to listen as much as to speak. Sansa saw to it that they learned the old god's ways, as well as the new, and that every spring, when the snows melted, they rode with her to the villages to hear the complaints of the free folk. Samwell Tarly's dream for the university in White Harbor had blossomed beyond any of their imaginings. Students came from all corners of Westeros and beyond, from Brevos, from Dorne, from the Summer Isles. Girls as well as boys wore the chains of learning, and their tutors numbered healers, builders, alchemists, even septons and septas of every faith. The library's great dome shone above the city's spires, filled with volumes in tongues that had not been spoken for 1,000 years. Sam and Gilly had a house on the university green, and in the evenings, when the lessons were done, their children and grandchildren gathered at their feet to hear tales of the old world. Arya returned home as she pleased, slipping through the gates of Winterfell without warning, her hair streaked by sun and salt, her eyes bright with secrets. She brought with her gifts from lands few in Westeros had ever dreamed. Jade bracelets from glass pearls from Ashai, a carved feather from the Summer Isles. She told stories in the long hall. Stories of gods who rode whales and storms, of cities built atop living trees, of wars that lasted a single night. Sometimes, when the children were abed and the moon high, Arya would slip away to the godswood and stand beneath the heart tree, eyes closed, lips moving in silent conversation with the old gods and the dead. No one ever asked what she said, but her smile in the mornings was softer, her laughter deeper. Brienne of Tarth had become Lord Commander of the Queen's Guard in King's Landing, though she traveled north each year, to spar with Jon and Daenerys' grandchildren, and to ride the wild, snowy forests with Sansa's kin. The stories told of Brienne in taverns from the Arbor to Old Town were of her honor, her courage, and the time she single-handedly stopped a riot in Flea Bottom by wading in with only a shield and a gentle word. Davos Seaworth retired to the Stormlands, where he and his sons captained a fleet of trading ships that ran from Skagos to Dorne, always flying banners that bore both the Onion and the Direwolf. Gendry ruled the Stormlands justly, and with a plain touch, he would walk his forges at dawn, black with soot, his children and Lady Arya's gifts at his side. The years brought change, as all years must. The old castle saw repairs, then improvements. Solar roofs to warm the stones, new wells, the first windmills. Old enemies became friends, and the lords who could not change found themselves left behind. Their power shrunk to lonely towers and faded parchments. The faiths learned to speak to each other rather than in spite of each other, and the septs and weirwood stood together as watchmen over the land. The wildlings, free folk as they insisted, kept their independence in the far north, yet sent envoys south every spring, bearing furs and honey and wild strawberries. Their children were welcomed at the White Harbor University, and many returned home as healers, teachers, or simply wiser than before. They built new halls north of the wall, ringed by great fires, and told tales of the times before peace, when only the strong survived. For a decade, then another, peace held. The children of the war, Jon and Daenerys' kin, Sansa's sons and daughters, Arya's distant, unlikely ward, grew into adults without ever having heard the drums of battle in their own lands. There were squabbles, of course. A border dispute here, a trade feud there, a bastard prince who tried to claim a castle with a forged letter, and a troop of hired swords. But each time, the realm resolved it not with fire, but with words, and sometimes the gentle threat of what the North could become if roused. Jon and Daenerys grew old together, and with age came reflection. In quiet moments, they walked the godswood at dusk, her hand in his, sharing memories that no one else could understand. Daenerys' hair faded to silver, her steps slowed, but she ruled her household with grace. Jon's face weathered, lines carved deep by laughter and loss, but his eyes never lost that haunted watchfulness, nor the fierce love he bore for his family. On a spring evening, as golden as their first days in King's Landing, Daenerys called her grandchildren to her side in the solar. They clustered around, eager and curious, clutching half-finished needlework or half-carved wooden toys. She spoke to them not of dragons and wars, but of the things peace required: patience, forgiveness, the courage to listen, the wisdom to know when to act and when to let be. She told them how she had once believed peace could only come through fire, and how Jon had taught her that true peace was built in the quiet acts of every day. Jon, watching from the window, caught her eye and smiled. Later, they sat together by the fire, the castle humming quietly around them. "Did you ever think we'd see this?" Daenerys asked, voice soft as the night beyond the walls. "Not once," Jon replied. "Not truly, but I hoped." "You always did," she said, and laid her head against his shoulder. They sat that way for a long time, listening to the wind and the distant laughter of children. In the capital, Tyrion Lannister, older, balder, but no less sharp, oversaw the council from the Hand's Tower. The city was transformed. Where once fire and blood had ruled, now music and learning did. The Dragon Pit, rebuilt and crowned with glass, housed plays, debates and tournaments, watched over by the statues of 3 dragons carved in marble and obsidian. Tyrion's reforms, enacted over decades, had changed the soul of the city. Tax on bread was cut to nothing, but levies on the great merchant fleets paid for libraries and free clinics. Justice was public, swift, and merciful. There was always some crime, always some poverty. Tyrion often said, "Perfection is the business of gods, not men." But no one in King's Landing starved, and no child went uneducated. When at last Tyrion set down the pin of the hand for the last time, the city celebrated with a week of revels, and he retired to Casterly Rock with Podrick Payne at his side, proud and content. Grey worms unsullied remained in Westeros, many settling along the Trident or in the Crown Lands, their children learning trades and marrying free folk and small folk alike. No army ever again challenged their banners. When Grey Worm himself passed away in ripe old age, his funeral brought folk from every corner of the realm. Freed slaves from the east, lords of Westeros, even old enemies, all to honor the man who had helped forge a gentler peace. In Old Town, the Citadel and the University worked together, sometimes uneasily, but always productively. Knowledge spread, and healers rode out to every corner of the realm each spring, bringing new medicines, new ways to grow crops, new letters for old records. By the 3rd generation, it was common for even the humblest crofter's child to read and write, and for the word of the maester to be valued alongside the word of the septon or the knight. As the old generation faded, the new one rose. Jon and Daenerys watched their children and grandchildren take on the cares of the realm, guiding but never commanding. They watched with pride and sometimes sorrow, knowing that peace, once won, must always be protected, and that even the best of rulers could only do so much. But they took comfort in the knowledge that the world had changed, that the wheel had finally broken and been remade, not by force, but by patience and love. One night, as snow fell thick outside the high windows of Winterfell, Jon awoke to find Daenerys sitting by the fire, her hair like spun moonlight, her eyes fixed on the dancing flames. He joined her, and they sat in silence for a time. "I dreamed of dragons," she said, voice low, "flying over the city, not in anger, but in wonder. I dreamed of the old world, and of what we built together." Jon took her hand. "You brought light where there was darkness." She shook her head gently. "We did, together." He pressed his lips to her brow, feeling the warmth of her skin, the gentle thrum of her heart beneath his palm. "Then let's dream together," he whispered. The fire burned low, and the night deepened. Somewhere, far off in the woods, a wolf howled, a call not of warning, but of homecoming. The wind rattled the shutters, but within, the warmth held. Years later, the bards sang of the peace of dragons and wolves, of the golden age that followed. They told of children who grew up beneath banners of both houses, of feasts held in halls from Dorne to the Wall, of kings and queens who ruled with wisdom and grace, of a realm that learned, at last, to heal itself. No one who lived through it ever forgot. And those born after grew up with the memory of that peace braided into their lives. The tales of dragon and direwolf, of fire and snow, of two rulers who loved the world enough to let it go when their time came. In the end, Jon and Daenerys passed together, old and beloved, and were laid to rest in the crypts beneath Winterfell, beneath the heart tree, whose roots ran deeper than time. There, together in stone, their hands clasped, the world remembered. And above, in a realm grown gentle, the wind in the leaves whispered their names. Jon, Daenerys, dragon, wolf, peace, forever and ever, as long as the north endured, as long as spring returned, as long as the memory of peace was needed. For in the end, that was their gift. Not a perfect world, but a better one. A world worth living for, worth striving for, worth loving. And that, at last, was enough. One down. As the ages turned, so too did the hearts and fortunes of Westeros, spun outward from that bright, improbable peace won by fire and frost, by the stubborn love of two souls who learned to forgive the world and themselves. Long after the passing of Jon and Daenerys, their tale was no longer recited as mere legend, but lived out daily in the gentle habits of a changed people, in the slow, deliberate making of a future shaped not by blood, but by hope and by the memories of all that once was lost. Winterfell's ancient stones outlasted many generations, its walls growing thicker with ivy and moss, its courtyards echoing with voices unafraid. The Godswood, where Jon had so often wandered in search of peace, grew dense with new saplings, and the heart tree stood taller than it had in centuries, its red leaves trembling in every wind, as if stirring with secret, ancestral laughter. The eldest grandchild of Jon and Daenerys, Rhaenyra Snow, called by her kin the White Rose for the streak of silver in her dark hair, stood beneath that heart tree on a spring morning with her council assembled. She was tall and clear-eyed, a ruler of both northern calm and Targaryen fire, schooled in letters and swordplay, and the ancient lore of both Old Town and Valyria. At her side stood her brother Edric, master of laws, with his easy wit and quick tongue, her cousin Khaleesi, Lady of Barrowton, renowned for her mercy and judgment, and Lyra Mormont, a ward who had grown from an orphaned bear cub of a girl into the North's most formidable knight. They gathered not to speak of war or tribute, but to plan the next festival of remembrance, a tradition born from Jon and Daenerys' later years, a 5-day celebration held in every holdfast and keep, where the stories of old sorrows were told openly and new oaths were made. To help the hungry, to tend the sick, to settle quarrels before they could fester into feuds. In these years, no one went unwelcome from a hearth at festival time. Throughout the north, the Reach, even in the islands and hills of Dorne, remembrance had become the truest bond of the realm. As Rhaenyra listened to her council's tales of preparations, 100,000 lanterns to be floated down the White Knife, 100 more barrels of apples and salted meats to feed every guest, she remembered her grandsire's quiet words to her as a child. If peace is to endure, It must have roots in every heart, not just the heart of a king. She repeated that line now, and saw her council smile, for they too had been shaped by the teachings of dragon and wolf. When business was done, the council scattered to their duties. Rhaenyra lingered beneath the heart tree. She felt its deep roots pulsing under her feet, as if the earth itself hummed in approval. Birds called overhead. The sun broke through the clouds, gilding the pool with trembling light. She was joined by Samwell Tarly's great-grandson, Maester Theomore, who had come north from White Harbor's University to deliver the new annals. He carried with him a great leather-bound tome, its pages a blend of official record and the songs and memories of common folk. Theomore bowed low, his chain clinking. "My lady, may I?" he asked, indicating the heart tree. "Always," Rhaenyra replied. They knelt together, the maester reading aloud the opening lines of the year's record. It began not with battles or deaths, but with the names of children born, fields sown, rivers kept clean, and quarrels settled with laughter. When he finished, she signed her name beneath the last entry. Tradition, now as holy as any sept's ritual, dictated that the annals be sealed with sap from the heart tree, so that the piece would be remembered as a living thing, growing still. With the business of rule behind her, Rhaenyra returned to the great hall for the midday meal, her retinue close behind. The walls were lined with banners: wolf, dragon, bear, trout, sun, and rose, each one woven in colors so vivid they seemed to ripple with every movement of air. At the high table sat men and women of every house, breaking bread together as friends. Below, small folk and sworn swords mingled in the same ease. Edric, her brother, was telling a story about his last journey to Sunspear, miming the stiff dignity of the Dornish prince and the shocking speed of the palace cooks. Laughter rolled down the benches. Rhaenyra caught her cousin Selyse's eye and nodded. There would be news from the southern coast soon. Trade matters, rumors of Carthene ships in the bay, perhaps another call for more healers. Nothing urgent, not today. In the afternoon, as sunlight stretched through the narrow windows, Rhaenyra walked the castle with Lyra Mormont. They inspected the granaries, greeted the tanners and coopers, listened to the young maesters teaching letters to any who wished to learn. In the armory, boys and girls trained together, practicing with wooden swords under the stern eye of an old knight who had once fought in the last of the old wars. Lyra tested the weight of a new steel blade, smiling. "They grow stronger every year," she said. "Soon they'll put even the stories of the long night to shame." Rhaenyra grinned. "If we're lucky, they'll never need more than stories." Outside, a late snow began to fall, fine and soft as silk. It dusted the roofs and courtyards, gathered in the godswood, and danced in the air like white fireflies. The castle did not retreat indoors, but spilled out into the falling snow, children spinning, dogs barking, cooks rolling barrels of ale across the bailey for the evening feast. The world was changed. Winter had become a celebration, the mark of survival and renewal. In the evening, the council met again in the solar, joined by Lady Sansa herself, white-haired now but still as sharp as a northern wind. She spoke with pride of her children and her grandchildren, of the fosterlings sent from the south to learn the ways of the old gods, of the peace that had become so expected no one could imagine losing it. "We do not fear war," she told Rhaenyra quietly, "because we do not forget what it cost to earn this calm. Your grandsire and grandmother did not buy peace with gold or blood alone. They gave the world a new way to live. We keep it alive, not by sword or spell, but by making sure everyone knows it is theirs." Answer now. That night, the hall was hung with lanterns, the fire roaring high in the hearth. Rhaenyra took her seat beside Lady Sansa and listened as minstrels sang the lay of the Dragon Wolf, not as a dirge, but as a hymn to endurance and trust. The refrain was picked up by the whole hall, even the youngest children. By the final verse, voices rang out in harmony. "And peace shall not perish, while hope endures, while kindness is given, while love secured." Outside, the snow deepened. The moon rose, haloed in silver. In the silent corridors, servants moved quietly, lighting more candles, seeing to the sleeping children. whispering goodnight to the old ghosts in the crypts. Beyond the walls, in the starlit darkness, the world endured. The river kept its slow course. The woods creaked and sighed. Somewhere a wolf called, and was answered. As dawn broke, Rhaenyra stood again beneath the heart tree, her hands buried in its gnarled roots. She felt the lives and memories braided beneath her, the countless hearts that had beaten and broken and mended to make this moment possible. She whispered a simple prayer of gratitude, of humility, of hope. In the years to come, peace would be threatened, as it always is. There would be lean seasons and foolish lords. There would be wild rumors and secret ambitions. But the old lessons held. When trouble came, it was met first with words, with patience, with the memory of all that could be lost. When the threat could not be eased, it was met by arms trained not only in battle, but in mercy. Each generation faced the challenge, and each found new ways to answer it. The free folk sent envoys to parley, and their young folk danced with the children of Winterfell on the first day of summer. In the south, harvest festivals filled the roads with pilgrims and merchants, none fearing brigand or pressgang. In King's Landing, the bells rang not for fire or siege, but for weddings and new treaties. The ships of Dorne and the Reach brought goods and news from distant lands, and the world grew ever larger, more wondrous. And at the heart of it all, the memory of Jon and Daenerys endured, not as untouchable monarchs, but as the ones who began the great experiment, who refused to let fear rule, who taught their world, slowly and stubbornly, to heal. In the crypts, their statues stood hand in hand, faces worn smooth by the years, and the gentle touch of countless children, lovers, and dreamers who came to pay respects. Flowers were left at their feet, not in mourning, but in promise, that the peace won so dearly would never again be left to fate alone. And the heart tree grew, its roots deeper every year, its leaves bright as blood and sunrise, its branches wide enough to shelter every story Westeros could ever tell. In its silent shade, the world remembered, and the world began again, each dawn and every spring. For peace, like love, is not a gift but a task, a thing made and remade, forever fragile, forever worth the making. And as long as the dragon and the wolf were remembered, as long as their story was sung, Westeros endured, not in the shadow of war, but in the bright, boundless promise of what people, together, could build and keep. The northern winds swept the valley, carrying scents of thawing earth and pine sap. Spring's melt was nearly finished. The snowbanks that had once swallowed the base of Winterfell's walls receded, leaving ribbons of green grass and little brooks singing through the outer bailey. In every corner of the keep, new life pulsed, ducklings in the moat, kittens beneath the granary, seedlings coaxed from icy soil by careful hands. The realm, generations removed from fire and war, thrived in a fullness neither dragon nor wolf alone could ever have foreseen. The festival of remembrance approached, and the castle braced for arrival of guests from every kingdom. Banners were washed and mended, stalls built, casks rolled in, and kitchens set to boiling and baking for a multitude. Within the heart of the keep, Lady Rhaenyra Snow, the white rose of Winterfell, the living blood of both Jon and Daenerys, oversaw preparations with the grace of a woman born to lead, and the patience of one who understood every seam and fracture of the peace she inherited. From dawn to dusk, Rhaenyra moved through the halls, checking bread ovens, sampling mead, listening to the complaints of carters whose wagons had stuck in late mud, consulting with her council on grain stores and security. She welcomed emissaries from the Sisters, the Trident, the Summer Isles, each with their own gifts: spices, silks, healing tinctures, tales of distant storms and stranger stars. Even from the far east, the black-sailed cogs of Yiti and Ashai brought scrolls for White Harbor's university, and rare herbs for the Citadel's healers. Winterfell itself seemed to stretch and shine beneath the labor. Its gates were adorned with branches of new-leafed oak and silver birch, woven into archways by the hands of orphans and septa alike. Stalls lined the main road with bright banners, fish pies and hot oat cakes, honeyed wine and blue cheese, copper work and blown glass. Laughter and song spilled from the smithy to the bell tower, and even the deerwolves that prowled the walls at dusk seemed infected by the joy, trotting with tails high, fur gleaming, eyes bright. Within the castle's solar, the lady gathered with her closest council for a final review. Edric, her brother and master of laws, had grown into a lean man with a blade of a mind, quick to smile but quicker to see a lie. Cousin Celise, Lady of Barrowton, sat to Rhaenyra's right, reading the latest from the southern roads. Lyra Mormont, now captain of Winterfell's guard, rested a scarred hand on the pommel of her sword, eyes half-lidded, relaxed only because she trusted the peace they had all labored to preserve. Theomore, Samwell's grandson and White Harbor's maester, unrolled a fresh letter. 4 ships arrived from Dorne this morning. They bring oranges, almond oil, and a sand steed as a gift for your youngest, my lady. He chuckled. The prince's daughter rides with the steed all the way from Sunspear. Let her lead the parade, Rhaenyra said, a smile tugging at her mouth. A Dornish child astride her horse. Let the realm see that a crown is not required to be celebrated. Celesia leaned forward. A troop of septas arrived from the Riverlands. They request the use of the septae for a night of prayers in remembrance of the lost. The gods' wood will be open to all faiths, as always. Not pain. Rhaenyra nodded. It is a festival of peace, not doctrine. Let the gods speak as they will. The heart tree can withstand any prayer. They dispersed on their tasks, each knowing what the realm expected. Hospitality, safety, the open hand that welcomed not only the powerful but the humble and the wandering. Rhaenyra herself visited the barracks at dusk, greeting each man and woman of her guard by name. She spoke to a girl with the salt tang of Skagos in her hair and the pale eyes of the true north, to a boy born in the shadow of the wall, who had come south seeking a new life. Peace does not keep itself, she told them, but grows from every choice we make, great and small. In the stables, Rhaenyra's youngest daughter, Alara, brushed the Dornish steed, giggling with the visiting princess as if they were lifelong sisters. Horses nickered, sparrows flitted in the rafters, and somewhere down the lane, the bell for supper tolled. The festival was not yet begun, but already Winterfell thrummed with purpose. Night brought guests. Torches ringed the castle walls, their flames mirrored in 1,000 windows and the glassy moat. Rhaenyra stood at the main gate as the last of the highborn lords arrived. The tall and stately Lady Margaery of the Reach, her son at her side, all in green and gold. Lord Gendry Baratheon, still broad-shouldered despite his gray hair. A contingent from the Free Folk, their leader a weathered woman with a carved bone torque, and a smile as quick as summer lightning. The crowd spilled into the great hall, warmth spilling into the chill night. There were toasts and songs and endless dishes. Roast duck and pork, honeyed turnips, rivers of strong cider. At the high table, Rhaenyra and her council shared stories with the new arrivals, all watched over by Lady Sansa, aged but sharp-eyed, who presided with a wry wisdom that kept the hall from ever tipping into arrogance. After the feast, when bellies were full and tempers bright, the first lanterns were lit. It was tradition, lanterns in every color, lifted by the children of each house and each land, carried to the ramparts or the highest window, and set aloft on gentle springs of warm air. They rose into the night, hundreds at first, then thousands, their lights reflecting off the snow and stone and water. Below, the people watched in awed silence, every face painted gold and crimson, blue and green. Bards played the lay of the dragon wolf. But here it was not a tale of war or vengeance. Instead, the verses dwelled on the stubborn courage of the years after, the building of roads and schools, the healing of old wounds, the long work of forgiveness. The refrain was sung softly by every voice, from Lady Sansa to the lowliest room. We keep the peace they left us. We mend what time would break. The following days were a festival not only of remembrance, but of making. Masons from the Vale taught children how to shape stone. Dornish dancers led lines through the snow. Reachmen planted apple seedlings in the new orchard. Free folk showed how to braid furs and weave traps. In the libraries, old letters and treaties were read aloud. And in the smithy, A pair of ironborn and riverlanders worked side by side forging new plowshares for distant villages. There were no tournaments, those were reserved for autumn's harvest, but there were foot races, riddling contests, and music in every court and corridor. Rhaenyra's eldest son, Jonas, took the youngest free-folk children out past the walls, teaching them how to find fox tracks and dig for wild leeks. Her daughter Alara and the Danish princess rode together daily, to the delight of every watcher. Even the oldest guests seemed caught in the fever of making. The queen's old guard, gray-haired and stoop-shouldered, ran a contest of storytelling and feats of memory, and the smallest child was cheered as lustily as the sharpest wit. On the fourth night, a sudden snowstorm blew down from the frost fangs, swirling around the keep, burying lanterns and smothering torches. The revelers crowded indoors, where the feast grew louder. Fires burned hotter, and every chamber filled with the warmth of too many voices, too much song, the sense that even a blizzard could not close the world again. Rhaenyra wandered from room to room, speaking with each guest, listening for unease or disappointment, but finding only gratitude and that particular joy that comes when hardship is faced together. She knelt beside a sleeping child from the arbor, tucking a blanket close. She listened to a graybeard from the west who remembered the sack of King's Landing, but now sent his grandsons to White Harbor to learn their letters. In the kitchens, she thanked every cook and servant by name. In the darkest hours of the night, Rhaenyra slipped out to the godswood. The snow fell softer there, whispering through the red leaves. She knelt by the heart tree, feeling its roots like a drumbeat beneath her hand. She remembered her grandsire and grandmother, all the words of hope and warning they'd left her, the stories she'd been told and retold by every elder of the house. She whispered her gratitude, her fear, her hope for all the children asleep within these walls and all the others across the realm. For a long while, she listened, and it seemed the heart tree listened too. When she stood, Lyra Mormont waited at the edge of the clearing. "All is well?" the old knight asked. Rhaenyra nodded. "All is well, but it never keeps itself." Lyra's smile was slow but certain. "That's why we're here, to tend the roots." By sunrise, the storm broke, and the last day of festival dawned blue and cloudless. The guests gathered in the yard, where the ground sparkled with new snow. Rhaenyra led the youngest in the festival's last rite, the planting of the promise. Each child, noble and commoner alike, pressed a seed or sapling into the soil of the godswood, then poured a scoop of water from the same silver ewer carried from the castle's well. No matter the hardship to come, this act, repeated each year, reminded all that peace required tending, that the roots of the realm were bound together. As the final seed was set, and the sun stood high above the heart tree, Rhaenyra looked out at her people, at kin and stranger, at new-made friends and old enemies reconciled, at children born long after her grandsire's passing, and she saw, if only for a heartbeat, the world Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen had dreamed. A realm at peace, not perfect but striving, its leaders wise enough to listen. The festival closed with a feast and one last song. The lay of the dragon wolf was sung again. The verses changed by every generation, yet the core remained, not fire and blood, not the sword and the crown, but the stubborn, beautiful act of choosing to build and to mend, to meet each other as equals, to let love and memory shape the future. That night, when the torches guttered and the keep was quiet, Rhaenyra sat alone in her solar. She read the new entries in the Book of Annals, ran her finger over the fresh seals of sap, and thought of the faces she'd seen, the voices she'd heard, the laughter and tears. She understood, as Jon and Daenerys had, that peace was no inheritance, but a practice, a thing always on the edge of being lost, and therefore always worthy of being made anew. Far below, in the crypts, the stones of dragon and wolf remained, hand in hand beneath the earth. The roots of the heart tree curled through the ancient dust, reaching for sun and rain, for the warmth of children's footsteps above, for the voices raised in gratitude and remembrance. And all through the keep, dreams flickered and rose, bright as the lanterns that lit the night, each one a promise, each one a beginning. Westeros endured, not because it was strong, nor because it was rich, but because its people remembered. And because the lessons of peace, taught long ago by a king who never wanted a crown and a queen who had learned mercy, lived on in every festival, every promise kept, every new root that pierced the earth. And thus, the world did not slip backward into darkness, but moved, slowly, steadily, stubbornly, toward a dawn that belonged to all.